So about 6 or 7 years ago, as a fun summer hobby project, Christiaan developed the Zombie Scrum Health Check. It became quite popular, and based on the data from that health check, Chris and I wrote the book, The Zombie Scrum Survival Guide, together with Johanna Schartau, our friend from Germany. A couple of years ago, something happened that evaporated all the work from our calendar, and we had a lot of time on our side, and we decided to use the time to turn the Zombie Scrum Health Check into a more professional product, which became the Scrum Team Survey. At some point, we did the shocking discovery that not all teams use Scrum. There are also some teams that use a more agnostic approach called Agile or Kanban, something like that. So we decided to make it Agile/Scrum Team Health Check. We started to expand the product with other features, and at some point the name totally did not make sense anymore. I already gave a bit of history to Jamie and Ange, and first of all, we wanted to go for a name that everyone could pronounce, Luminate. Then someone already claimed the name apparently. So now we have a name that hardly anyone can pronounce, Columinity. Maybe it helps if you know like what the name stands for. The Co is community and collaboration. Lumen is illuminate, so shine light on what's going on in teams and in the environment of teams. And the inity is don't do it once, but it's an infinity loop. Do it continuously. So co-luminity. And the purpose that we have in mind is to support teams become more effective through data-informed decisions and scientific insights. I just wrote it down just before the session. The most important part is actually visualized. We wanted to build a tool that strongly emphasizes a do-it-yourself character. So we really wanted to, actually our secret mission, I'm not sure if there are any consultants out there, our secret mission was to build a tool that will make the Accentures, the Capgeminis, etc. totally out of work. This was going to be the tool that coaches, Scrum Masters, teams could just use for themselves to continuously improve. We have not succeeded yet, but who knows what the future will bring. But that was the intention. And at the same time, also, Christiaan started collaborating with Daniel Russo, a professor from Denmark. And together they used the data to write an academic paper, which got approved a couple of years ago as an official academic paper. And this model is part of that academic paper and is also integrated into Columinity. So at some point in time, I will explain this model, but let's make it a bit interactive for a moment. Let's see. What is the question? Yeah. So you are going to answer, if you like, your answer in the chat. So what sub-factor, I mean the small circles, seems most important in your experience? So I'm going to go back to the illustration. So if you look at this illustration, what of the sub-factors, could be one, could be multiple, seems most important in your experience? Could be feedback gathering, value focus, just try to pick one that, so open communication, totally agree, but it's not a sub-factor in this illustration. So try to pick one that's illustrated. That makes it a bit easier. Cross functionality, yeah.
Sorry, Barry, is that the most important for team effectiveness?
Yeah, that's already an advanced question. I would say so. Let's go for yes. Yeah, yeah. Management support, yeah. And then which one of management support? So try to focus on the smaller circles because those ones are a bit more detailed. Self-management, metric usage, psychological safety, supporting leadership. So I was trying to look for a pattern, but I think the pattern is that it's mostly different. Is that also a pattern then? I guess so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're slowly gonna go to the next one. So again, if you focus on the small circles in your own experience, which one, oh, no. I think I already said challenging, right? No, most important. Ah, started to get confused myself. Did I say challenging or most important? Did someone help me out there?
Most important.
Okay, then it's all good. So most challenging. So again, in the chat, if you focus on the small circles in your own experience, which one do you consider the most challenging? Challenging as in to improve, challenging to use in a good way. Okay, we're gonna do one more round. This is the advanced round. You can put it in the chat, but if that's a bit too much of writing, you can also just unmute yourself and share your thoughts. The question is, if you look at the small circles, which ones do you feel are connected to each other? And I'm going to give you an example. Shared goals is connected to team morale, because if people or if teams have a shared goal, it's quite likely that you will also see an increase in how they use team morale. And if teams do not have a shared goal, it's quite likely that you will see a decrease in team morale. So those two are connected with each other. And if you would look at the small circles, you should be maybe able to spot other connections as well. So maybe we can hear one or two.
Release
that you
frequency
feel.
and release automation are, I mean, in the same area, but they're also highly related. So the more
Yeah.
automation and more test-driven automation you can get, the faster and you can release. It's a better release too.
Yes. Yeah, totally correct, Jason. Thanks. Maybe one more?
Psychological safety in team morale and team conflict, these are like psychological aspects, pretty interconnected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I also saw noticed some, maybe not sure if that was you, but some appear in the chat as well. Yeah, totally agree. So I'll explain the model in my own words. If I explain the model, I always start on the right side, team effectiveness. That's basically the end goal that we have in mind. And I'm aware that it's a simplification, but our definition of team effectiveness is those are teams that have a high morale and they have satisfied stakeholders. And I always emphasize that morale goes deeper than happiness itself. I always have a bit of second thoughts when I see these happiness metrics in teams or organizations. Happiness is part of morale, but if teams have a very strong and compelling purpose, then it's not necessary for them to be super happy every single day to still have a high morale. Of course, if unhappiness becomes a pattern, then it probably will influence morale, but we measure more things when it comes to team morale. 5 primary factors directly influence the effectiveness of a team, and one of them is stakeholder concern. Stakeholder concern means, do we as a team understand who our stakeholders are? And when I say stakeholders, it depends a bit on what type of team you are. It could be a customer, it could be a user, could be a stakeholder. A bit difficult to make it at to stick to one term, but we have chosen stakeholders. So does a team understand who their stakeholders are? Are they able to effectively collaborate with their stakeholders? Do they understand what value they need to deliver? And do they also understand what long-term and short-term goals they need to achieve in order to deliver that value? And a different way to look at stakeholder concern is that there is a shared feeling of product ownership. Meaning, when you use Scrum, it's not only the product owner that collaborates with the stakeholders and that understands the roadmap and does refinement, etc. But you could approach any random team member to answer those, to address those topics, and they can also give you information about it. Stakeholder concern is connected to responsiveness, and responsiveness means the things that we learn by closely collaborating with our stakeholders are also things that we can quickly respond to or act upon. And therefore, release frequency, release automation, and refinement are part of responsiveness. Now, those factors can only work if there's a climate of continuous improving. So we're moving to the left side. And some examples that make up a climate of continuous improvement are psychological safety, that there's an environment where learning and experimentation is encouraged. And for example, there's a focus on navigating conflict in a healthy and constructive way. Now, continuous improvement is related again to team autonomy, because the things that a team identifies as potential improvements are ideally also things that they have the autonomy and the freedom for to make it happen. And finally, there's a super clear pattern that we can see in all the data. And by now, it's more than 15,000 teams that have used Colominity. And we are continuously validating new data according to this model. And a very clear pattern is that all of these factors will only work if there is sufficient support from management and leadership in the organization. So management support and leadership support is basically upholding the entire model. That's the 2 or 3 minute-ish version of this model. Any questions or any things that you would like to know more about? Just unmute yourself and share your question, or put it in the chat.
I have a question about these like building blocks. Are they equally important for team effectiveness, or you have noticed any patterns? Like you mentioned about management support as foundation for everything. Maybe there are like other different contributions.
We removed it from this illustration, but if you check the scientific paper, that's where you can see basically all the numbers, to what extent each factor actually impacts the other factors. So that's a good question. We do explain it in the academic paper. So just to be clear, this is not the ultimate truth to see what's going on in teams. We always explain that this is just one model, just one lens to look at what's going on. What we have in mind with our product is to expand it with other models and lenses as well. And this is, for example, already a second model that's still in beta. It's totally not connected to Agile or Scrum, but it measures the quality of teamwork in general. Because most organizations also have teams that have got nothing to do with Agile or Scrum, but they do have teams. For example, a leadership team. They could use, for example, this model to see what's going on. And we finalized our official collaboration with a professor from Germany, Karen Eilers. And together with her, we're gonna add a third model to the tool, and that's gonna be focused on the Agile mindset. So the roadmap that we have in mind is to continuously collaborate with other academics and also conduct our own research and continuously develop new lenses that can give you an indication of what's going on in and across teams. And I'm not going to make it a Colominity demo, but just to give you an idea, this is the model. You might recognize it, but this is a screenshot of the tool itself. So teams complete a questionnaire based on the questionnaire results up there. And the real strength of the tool is that if you use it with multiple teams, you can also see patterns across the teams. For example, Lego, that's our biggest client, they use it with 150 teams. And then it can give you an indication of, okay, what's the pattern that we can see across all the teams? So where should we focus our coaching efforts on? So that's about it, what I would like to explain about Colominity. If you're interested in more details, just send me a message. So moving on. So I think about 4 years ago, we started collaborating with the Lego group and Christine Mann, she's our main contact. From now on, when I say we, it's going to be us as the Liberators plus the Lego group, because I'm just going to share a couple of lessons learned about the years that we've been collaborating with them. Now, Christina is actually the person standing, what is it called, in the forefront on the right side. And she is director of a certain part of Agile coaches at the Lego group, just so you know. Well, lesson number 1 is well, the whole point of the Lego group being a client would not have happened if we would have stuck to Scrum. So I'm aware that this is Scrum Masters of the universe, so it might be a sensitive synthesis to say, but for them it was actually just a no-go if we would have stayed to Scrum itself. So if we would have kept it a Scrum team survey. So they said, well, at Lego, we have Scrum teams, but we have all kinds of teams. The teams have the freedom to choose the framework and method that fits them best. And they don't have any constraints to that. And teams can also continuously switch, like, hey, in the upcoming period, we're going to do Kanban. And then a couple of months later, we're going to switch back to Scrum. They don't have any constraints. And that might make it, from the outset, feel a bit chaotic, but it actually works. And the reason that they like this model is it doesn't tell you anything about a specific method or framework. So regardless of what type of framework or method the teams are using, they all measure how they are doing based on the same factors. So this model is basically just this neutral language, neutral shared language that they all use, regardless of the type of framework or method that they are using. Actually, I'm gonna Jamie, or yeah, maybe Jamie. How am I doing time-wise? Because I don't see a clock. So I just want to prevent that suddenly it's like 1 hour later and I'm halfway.
You're good. You have about half an hour.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Thanks. Inspecting the depth, right? So I'm going to show you an illustration. And the question for you is, in the next illustration, what essential coaching instrument do you see? And what makes it essential? And maybe just let's focus on question number 1 first. Hopefully it's obvious. Maybe just in the chat, maybe someone can clarify. So what's the coaching instrument that you see? Yes, flashlight. That's it. Okay, check. So that's question number 1. Now, question number 2 is, if you think about, is it a metaphor? Is that the right term? If you think about the metaphor of using a flashlight in an organization, what makes it an essential coaching instrument? Just take some time to get your own thoughts, to collect your own thoughts. What makes a flashlight an essential coaching instrument? Is there one courageous person that maybe would like to share his or her thoughts about it? Just unmute yourself if you like. Revealing the system to itself. Yeah.
I would say it's to maintain transparency.
Yeah. Totally agree. Showcase reality, focus, highlights issues and successes. Yeah. Great. Yeah, this is the transparency part. I think in the Scrum Guide, I cannot really paraphrase the Scrum Guide, but I think there is this one line that says something about without transparency, you cannot do proper inspection. And if you cannot do proper inspection, adaptation will also be impacted, etc. So it all starts with transparency. And what I notice sometimes when I work with coaches is that they have the tendency to focus on things that are not going well. And always try to encourage them, like, okay, keep doing it, but they also try to focus on things that are actually already doing well. So shine light on failures, maybe things that you can improve, but also on success stories. And make it, don't be the owner of the flashlight. So try to encourage team members themselves to also create transparency about what's going on. That's the do-it-yourself part again. Yeah. Just check in the chat if there are any other things. I like revealing the system to itself. That's actually already quite deep. And that with a flashlight. Yeah. And maybe don't go cheap with your flashlight. Go for an advanced one. So also, it connects to using a flashlight, make gaining the benefits of Agile a shared responsibility. So this is, you might recognize it from the earlier illustration. This is version number 2, after I got some feedback from Christina. And the difference is that it's not like coaches on one side and then the rest of the organization on the left side. Just make it a shared responsibility. I would say as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach, it is your responsibility to have a clear understanding about so what could be the potential benefits of Agile for this team or for this organization, and to create transparency about are they actually, to what extent do we actually gain or achieve these benefits. But gaining the benefits of Agile should be a shared responsibility. So as a coach or as a Scrum Master, you should collaborate with team members, managers, stakeholders in the organization to start achieving them. But you should have clarity about so what are actually the benefits of Agile and to what extent do we gain them. Now, the question is, if you think back about the very first exercise in the chat that we've done, how do you actually measure the benefits of Agile? So if you think back about, so what could be examples of benefits of Agile, how can you actually measure these benefits? How do you know you are gaining these benefits of Agile? So again, in the chat, so maybe just unmute yourself. Maybe someone that I haven't heard yet and feels like speaking. Yeah, so if I can ask you, Jason, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm doing it. Value delivered, that's a good example. But how do you know, how can you measure that you delivered the value?
Well, there's the intangible and the tangible. So, right, the tangible ones. So if you have a project application or whatever that has a dollar value attached to it, so we know we're going to save $1.5 million by delivering this. You could break those features down by, as we release the features, we have a value driven. That's the easier piece to say, right? We're bringing a dollar value by each feature that we bring out.
Yeah.
The intangible ones are probably why we're here. How the harder ones are why are we here? What are we trying to learn here to prove that value? That's the more intangible pieces. So I don't really have an
Yeah.
answer for that.
No, that's fine. It's already a perfect answer. Yeah. So in this illustration, we tried to visualize and illustrate, I think 5, 6, maybe even 7 ways of how we collect data with Colominity, and how you could actually also collect data and insight of what's going on. And actually, it's not even connected to Colominity. Just if you work just without Colominity, you can also do this. So see if in the chat as a group, we can gather all the examples of what we try to illustrate. Shadowing teams, yeah. Although I try to see a bit more shadowing, yeah. It's not spying. I would say it's more like just position, do the Gemba walk. Maybe that's a good way to describe it. Just do a Gemba walk, position yourself in the midst of teams so that you get a good sense of what's going on. Yeah, the helicopter view, that's a very good one. Also, so zoom in, but also zoom out, so that you can see also what's happening across teams, across the entire organization. In Jira-like systems, I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Scrum Masters don't like Jira, so be careful here.
Yeah, what else? What do you see top right? Actually already says it. Does it? Yeah. So we're just going to give you the answers. So I think you identified 2 out of 7. I'm just going to say, well done. The Gemba walk, already explained that one. Helicopter view. Then top right, there is the gut feeling agile coach, or the intuition agile coach, or Scrum Master. So that's one way to see what's going on. Top left, there is a person, that's actually a bit tricky, but that's a person doing scientific research. So that's one. And in the middle part, you can see someone talking to what we try to illustrate, a stakeholder, a user, and a supporter. And supporter, that's the term that we use for leaders and managers, because they should support the teams. So, so we use quantitative and qualitative data, scientific insights, observations, and intuition to see what's going on in a team. And based on that, we make decisions. And we could also be the team itself, of course, because that's the whole do-it-yourself point. Now, I have the opinion that using your intuition and gut feeling is totally fine as long as you add quantitative and qualitative data and scientific research into your decision-making process. Christiaan has a bit more fanatic other opinion. He says you should never use your gut feeling and your intuition because it's biased and it can also have consequences that you're not hoping for. But I would say, well, combining it is totally fine. Just be mindful that you don't only base decisions on gut feeling. I'm just moving the Zoom bar. I would like to put it over there. Okay, overall, I would say use the data. I'm struggling with the Zoom bar. Yes, there it is. No, go over there. Yep. Overall, use the data to use a systemic approach, because I would say what we try to visualize is layer number one is one team, but overall focus your efforts on data across teams. So again, look for patterns, address challenges across teams, and try to identify the trends. So as a coach, try to work together, and that's already the next one, to set a shared coaching focus. So based on what's going on across teams, identify a trend, and based on the trend, you identify a shared coaching focus, because that allows you to collaborate with each other so that you don't have all these individual coaches working on their own island. But that allows you to really have an organizational impact while working together on a shared coaching focus. And if you use data across teams, and this is basically the model, then the model will tell you, hey, we can see that most teams struggle with management support. So maybe as coaches, you should work together to see how you jointly can improve management support in the organization. I'm just going to pause for a moment because I think I went quite fast. So what I did, I explained this part, which type of data and scientific insights we use. Then I explained use it to identify trends and patterns. And then I explained try to use this systemic approach to identify a shared coaching focus to make an organizational impact. So before I move to the next part, are there any thoughts or questions about this? Does it make sense, or do I need to explain certain parts? And for me, silence simply means this was awesome, could not have been more clear. Please move on. Cool. I see 2 thumbs up out of 55. That's a good score. Okay. So, when it comes to using data, this is going to be you writing in the chat. What do you consider a no-go? So when it comes to using data or metrics, what do you consider a no-go? Any thoughts on this?
Never fully rely on data, because data is just part of bigger picture.
Yeah. Would agree. What else?
You can manipulate data and metrics to suit your needs, so don't always rely on it, because it's easy to manipulate both one way or the other if you want it.
Yeah. And Joanna, that's spot on. So I can already move to the next slide. It's about the conversation that you have about the data, not about the data itself. And there is even like the number one feature request that we get is like, why isn't there an easy export function that exports the data in a super nice PDF so that we can just share it across the organization? Well, because of that, we do not want to have the data in a nice fancy PDF that could be easily shared across the organization, because then the pitfall could be that the data is going to live a life on its own, while the whole point is use the data as a conversation starter, because the number itself doesn't tell you anything actually. It's about the story behind the numbers. Because a downward trend doesn't actually mean that things are going worse. It could also mean that a team was apparently way too optimistic the first time, they got some feedback, they learned a lot, and the second time that they took a questionnaire, they became a bit more self-critical, and therefore the numbers are lower. Then I would say that's a nice development. That should be maybe just celebrated. But if you don't have the conversation, then maybe you can draw just totally wrong conclusions. So it's always about the conversation that you have about the data. I'm gonna skip this part, or I'm gonna just make it super fast. Like liberating structures, if you know me a little bit, then you know that I'm a big fan of it. So what we have done is we also encourage the use of liberating structures. For example, discuss the research with Shift and Share, Conversation Cafe. Each slide that you see, by the way, is a workshop template that you could also get afterwards if you like. But I'm gonna go super fast through it right now. We identified 10 principles that hopefully trigger ethical use of Code-amenity, and we recommend, for example, to trigger a conversation about these 10 principles with appreciative interviews, min specs, or TRIS. If you don't know liberating structures, then maybe this is just abracadabra. I'm not sure if that's an English word. Anyhow, if you do know it, then it might make sense. We always kickstart teams with purpose to practice, because I would say the purpose part, it's a bit of an open door, but it's really essential. If teams do not know why, what's in it for them by using Code-amenity, then probably already on a slippery slope. They should really understand that it's there to help them improve and not to satisfy some kind of leader in the top corner of the organization. 2 more to go. We inspect results with what, so what, and now what. And finally, we actually use patterns to develop strategies with a concept of liberating structures called strategy not working. So this is a concept to turn ambitions into reality. And this is easily a one-day workshop. This is all open source. You can actually hidden behind the chat on my screen, you can actually see the blog post that describe all of this in way more detail. So if this triggers a tiny bit of interest, you can just check it out yourself and even do it yourself. Finally, 3 things to be mindful of. And Jamie, quick check, time-wise, how am I doing?
You're good. You have 12 minutes or so.
Cool. So 3 things to be mindful of. Number 1, be mindful of coaching hierarchies. And with a coaching hierarchy, I mean you have a Scrum Master as the junior. I'm not sure if you see my fingers, but the junior. Then you have the Agile coach, and on top of that, you have the Enterprise Agile coach, and maybe there's even something on top of the Enterprise Agile coach. I don't know. But then you have this coaching hierarchy in place, and each role is responsible for a slice of the organization. But it's a horizontal slice. Scrum Master focus on teams. Agile coach focus on the environment, and then the enterprise agile coach focus on top management, etc. That's of course super ineffective when it comes to problem solving, because the tougher impediments do not nicely stick to these horizontal slices. They go across the entire organization. So I'm not like necessarily pro Scrum Master or anti-agile coach. It's not really about the roles itself, but I am a big supporter of coaching vertically. So make someone a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, doesn't really matter, but just responsible for a vertical slice of the organization. Sort of do end-to-end coaching. That's in my experience way more effective. And be mindful of your coaching distance. There is no right or wrong. It's not like if you are the person on the right side, that you're doing a great job and the person on the left is not doing a good job. I would say sometimes it makes sense, or you should spend time within the team. That's often mostly what Scrum Masters do, which is totally fine. But also as a Scrum Master, you should occasionally put yourself outside of the team. For example, to work with management in the organization to remove impediments. But if you only work outside of the teams, the tricky part might be that you lose the feeling of what's actually going on within teams, and you might start doing assumptions. So it's a balancing act. So eternal fame for the person that can see the liberating structure that's being drawn on the whiteboard. One is thinking what he's talking about. This is an important, a critical moment in my presentation. Who can guess the liberating structure on the whiteboard?
You mean the eco cycle?
Yes.
Yes.
So who was it? Eternal fame being earned.
But you were joking because it was so obvious. I thought it was a joke effect. But
Well
yeah.
done. Yeah, it's eco cycle planning. Yep. And finally, try not to get stuck in your Scrum bubble or your Agile bubble. It's a tendency that, well, each community basically has, in a way, a community is a form of a bubble. Maybe this user group is also a type of bubble. And in a way, it's totally fine. Could also be a safe environment to share thoughts, ideas, challenges, to give and get help, etc. But the pitfall might also be that if you are only working within your bubble, then you might get this us versus them conversation or feeling, and then it becomes more like a toxic bubble. So also try to have an open mindset, and I think would say if you work with teams, you automatically get unstuck of your bubble. But try not to get stuck in your Agile bubble and to create this toxic environment. I would say if I see what's happening on LinkedIn nowadays or what's happening with the whole Agile Alliance part, etc., it's yeah, just have some mixed feelings about it. I actually think it's a lot of these bubbles are being popped, so I think that's actually I'm quite positive about it. Actually, it's a healthy trend that I see in the community. So try to get in touch with the real world. Some closing words. So now let's read all these sentences together. Well, that's what we're not going to do, but I'm gonna share, or you can just, I think you can just download this presentation and you can just read the summary in your own time afterwards. I'm just gonna skip that one as well. If you're interested in the research that we are doing, then this is the roadmap. Papers that we, and when I say we, all credits should go to Christiaan, my colleague, and Daniel Russo. Papers that they have already published are a theory on Agile/Scrum Team Effectiveness. That's what the model is based on. They also wrote a paper on the double-edged sword of diversity in teams. Diversity in the broadest sense. So not just gender, but also just experience, background, etc. The short version is diversity increases effectiveness of teams until the point that it doesn't. Bit of a lame answer, but that's the short version of the paper. Do scaling approaches actually make a difference when it comes to team effectiveness? Short answer, no, they don't. And upcoming research topics are how do teaming strategies, and by teaming strategies we mean the way teams are formed, the way teams are designed, how do they impact the effectiveness of a team, the impact of working from home, validation and inclusion of productivity metrics, and finally the impact of leadership styles on team effectiveness. So that's upcoming research. We use the data from Community to conduct the research, and the findings are put back into the tool as recommendations again. So that's the loop that we continuously use. This is the link to use Community. There is a blog post, a couple of resources you can find on the left that explain how to get started with Community. And finally, this is the closing slide. We organize our meetups nowadays from Eventbrite. We've got a couple of meetups scheduled. These are just free meetups, just like these ones. So if you're interested in joining meetups, just check the Eventbrite page. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Oof. I think I did quite nicely within the time box.
Yeah, perfect timing. We have a few minutes if, do you want to take any questions, Barry? We have a few minutes here if anybody.
No questions.
No.
No, that's fine. So just if you have a question, just
I'll let you take yourselves off mute. If you have a question, just go ahead.
I have one, the short one. What is the timeline for publishing the researchers? I mean, have you collected data already, or do you need time to collect them and publish them? So it's like half a year. I mean, should we wait for it anytime soon, or is it just like several years timeline?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So writing the paper goes actually quite fast. And so Christian is quite good at, is quite fast in writing the paper. That's the way you should say it. Getting it approved as an official academic paper, that's where the waterfall process starts. That's super slow. That could easily take 6 months until a year. But what we are doing is that if we have a paper, then Chris often already publishes it as a blog post so that you can already read some of the findings. But Chris is a bit overwhelmed with, he wears multiple hats. The one that is mostly on his head right now is software developer. So he's spending probably 60 to 80 hours a week on being a software developer. So he's probably going to use his vacation to do more research.
Any other questions? It's quiet.
I have one more. I just wanted to give space to someone else, but sorry for bombarding you with the questions. I have a question. Barry, have you got experience in applying agile practices to scientific worlds, like the laboratories in universities and stuff like that? Because recently I got a understanding that they're using some sort of like random processes. And yeah.
Well, personally, I don't, but Daniel Russo, the one that co-wrote one of the papers, he is continuously using agile practices at his university. And he's also totally willing to talk about it and to share his findings. We visited him, I think a couple of months ago, and then he has this workspace with his students with all kinds of Scrum posters and refinement illustrations, and that's actually pretty cool. So they also use this Scrum rhythm with their students. But you can just approach him. He's more than happy to talk about it. I'll just write his name in the chat.
I'm just going to ask a question, Barry. It sounds like you've got a really good sample size of data.
Yeah.
From the data that you received, it looks like more than just a Lego group, right? What has surprised you from the data that you've been sort of assessing?
Oh, wow. The biggest question to as the closing part. Well, it's not the data. It's so maybe the illusion that we had a couple of years ago is that when we really started investing serious time in the product and it became a serious product, we would have thought this would have been a no-brainer for Scrum Masters and coaches to use. Like things would explode, and Chris and I needed to hide. Like we would be overwhelmed with how many coaches and Scrum Masters would use the product. And then what is it called in English? Like this desert, and then you have this tumbleweed. That's sort of like what happened. Crickets, where we could hear the crickets. So like, what's going on? Like why is it that not automatically everyone is embracing it? And then we noticed that actually quite a lot of coaches, Scrum Masters, they have different reasons. It's the not invented by us syndrome, but also they find it quite scary to use data in their work. Like what if this is gonna make visible how I'm doing as a Scrum Master? What are others going to think about me? So instead of seeing it as a companion that can help you where you can put your coaching efforts, we notice a clear trend that a lot of Scrum Masters and coaches are a bit skeptical about it. They find it maybe a bit scary. They don't use the word scary, but it's more like what we feel. So they try to focus more on gut feeling and intuition, because that's my interpretation. That's abstract and ambiguous, and but that's like the maybe the irony. I think a lot of organizations are struggling with deciding the value of their coaches because it's so, what is it called, abstract. And we give Scrum Masters and coaches an opportunity to make their impact and their value visible. But still, not everyone is on the same page when I explain this. And that's actually, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that's what mostly surprises me. And it's not about columnity, because of course I'm biased with columnity, but it's more like using data and scientific insights in general, which is not. We do see a trend that also other frameworks that are based on that are being more and more embraced. But yeah, that's my biggest surprise.